I want to start this episode slowly because this conversation doesn't live in urgency. It lives in the aftermath. Think about a time you showed up different as a leader. You softened your tone. You listened more. You were even more compassionate. And you sat and quietly waited. But it never came. At the end of last episode, I asked a question leaders often don't say out loud because it makes them uncomfortable. I asked a question that lives right here in this moment, not in the leadership books, not in performance metrics, but in the quiet moments leaders don't talk about. What do you do when compassion has returned, but trust did not walk through the door? And if you're honest, that question doesn't come from leaders who don't care. It comes from leaders who finally slowed down, started listening, became more human, and expected something to change. But nothing did. Because what no one tells leaders is that compassion isn't an automatic reset button. And showing up better doesn't mean your team is ready to believe you yet. Compassion repairs the emotions, but trust repairs the memory. Teams don't forget patterns just because your tone has changed. Hi, if we haven't met yet, my name is Antrea Dowd. I am a leadership and organizational development professional, an educator, leadership coach, and a student of human behavior. I have spent decades in healthcare, education, and leadership development, working with teams when things are going well, and more importantly, working with them when trust has been damaged. This is purpose, presence, people. Because leadership isn't just about what you do. It's about who you are when it matters most. Today's conversation isn't about becoming a better person. It's about becoming a credible leader after the rupture. We're going to get uncomfortable and do some self-reflection. And if you've ever taken a workshop by me before, you know my favorite thing to say is I need you to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's where revelation happens. And so for all those leaders who are doing the work and wondering why the room still feels guarded, stay tuned and let's talk about why. I'm Antrea Dowd, leadership strategist, speaker, and former director of patient experience with a foundation in leadership and organizational development. I've spent my career helping leaders show up with presence, communicate with intention, and drive results through people, not pressure. This podcast is about leadership that's practical, human, and impactful. Let's begin. So let's start with the operational cost. And I say that because most leaders think that cost is emotional. I'm sorry, it's actually operational. Teams with low trust don't leave immediately, and this is why they cause the damage, because what they do is they disengage first. They stop reporting problems. They stop catching errors early. They stop caring beyond their job description. And silence, that is the most expensive piece to the organization, far more than turnover will ever cost you. This is the way silence shows up in work. It's the reworks, the missed handoffs, the avoidable conversations, slower throughput, higher burnout, higher absenteeism, safety events, that could have been prevented. Low trust rarely shows up on our dashboards, but it will always show up in our outcomes. So if you've ever sat back and said, I don't understand why everything feels harder than it should, well, congratulations. You're looking at the cost of mistrust. Here's the part of the leadership conversation that people skip. This moment when you're trying and nothing changes. This is where good leaders get discouraged. And unfortunately, bad leadership patterns slowly return. Compassion is emotional climate. Trust is the operational performance. Teams don't experience leaders in moments. They experience your leadership by the patterns of your behavior. So compassion makes people feel heard, but trust, that's what makes people feel safe enough to act. So when trust is missing, again, teams don't fail loudly. You're not going to see it immediately. It's just going to slowly happen over time, right? You don't believe me? Think about this. Take a moment and think about the last time that your team could have said something sooner. That silence that they gave you wasn't apathy. It was risk calculation. You see, they disengage cognitively. And so they stop thinking ahead for you. Your team doesn't sit back and ask, are they kind today? Is today a good day to approach? They ask, is it safe enough to rely on the behavior that they see? You see, consistency is key here. One empathetic conversation does not cancel 12 months of unpredictability. Believe me, I've checked. I've done the math. Math ain't mathin'. Your team doesn't doubt your compassion. What they doubt is your durability. Think about a leader who hurt your trust. What made you skeptical when they suddenly became nicer? When they showed up differently, what did you watch for? I can tell you what I watched for. I was watching for their tone. I was watching to see how their behavior would be when things got tough again. That hesitation that you and I felt, that is not resistance. That's self-protection. Because when compassion shows up late to the party, teams don't automatically go, oh, compassion is here. I feel real. I feel relief now. We can all take a chill pill and get calm. What happens is they feel cautious. Nothing confuses a team faster than a leader who suddenly discovered empathy on Tuesday. Trust is an organizational experience, not a feeling, right? And so your team will assess your predictability. They assess, are you going to follow through? And most importantly, they're looking at your emotional regulation. Because compassion without consistency feels unstable, and instability will definitely hit your metrics. From an organizational development perspective, trust isn't restored when leaders feel remorse. It's restored when behavior becomes boringly reliable. Your intent will lead to the impact, will lead to a pattern, will create safety, and you will finally get your trust. Because let me explain to you how the way it works. Leaders assume intent equals impact. Teams, however, evaluate safety, not sincerity. When trust is lost in an organization, you end up with a wait and see culture. I'm going to wait for that person to say something, or I'm going to wait to see what happens when that person says something. And meanwhile, nothing is getting done, right? Your team wants you to be consistent in your behavior. Nothing makes a team more nervous than a leader who suddenly read one article and found their feelings, and now they're good. When I teach this in my leadership class, this is where the room gets really quiet, because this is where they realize trust isn't rebuilt with just better words, right? It's rebuilt with boring consistency. You're not going to be able to KPI your way out of this. Now, settle in, because this is where it gets uncomfortable. Remember what I said? I need you to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Here's the blind spot that almost every well-intended leader has. You ready? You healed first. Just that simple. Leaders heal faster than teams. You know why? Because as a leader, you process things internally. You're thinking about it for months before you step into it. Teams process externally. And unfortunately, the timeline is never aligned. See, you've had months of that self-reflection, those inner conversations to get to this point where you can show up with compassion. But your team has had weeks of observing that behavior. Simply put, it's like you're in chapter 12 and they just finished the introduction to the same book. You're not on the same page. And so I want you to think about this with me, okay? If you were sitting in your team's chairs, let's just reverse the situation just for a moment. What would you be skeptical of? Now, the answer to that question requires honesty, self-reflection, and the courage to look at the man in the mirror. Okay. I always share a story, right? And so I want to step out of leadership just for a moment, and I'm going to talk about something that happened in my real life. There was a relationship in my life where care had lost. We had been losing it. Not because there wasn't love, but because presence didn't show up in the way that it should have. Eventually, the conversations happened. Apologies were said. I mean, real ones. We were sincere, right? And so care returned, but trust didn't. And here's what surprised me the most. I wanted the relationship to move forward faster than safety allowed. I mean, I was ready. I wanted to get out of that uncomfortable space of our relationship. But trust wasn't there. And so wanting trust back isn't the same as being ready to hold it. You see, a lot of my leadership lessons come from situations that I've encountered and learned during my leadership journey. I can tell you that the hardest leadership lesson I learned wasn't how to repair trust. Books show you how to do that. But how to do it without being rewarded immediately. You see, the hardest part wasn't changing. It was changing and not being trusted yet. It was doing the work and nothing was changing. No one was recognizing all of my good effort that I was putting forward. Ladies and gentlemen, it turns out that growth doesn't come with a standing ovation. It comes with awkward silence. And so when trust doesn't return, leaders do one or two things. They over-explain or they get discouraged. But there's a third option. I want you to think of 4 steps that I'm going to give you. The first thing is to acknowledge. Acknowledge without defending. Don't explain, I was under pressure, so that's why I responded like that. Right? Name that gap out loud. Take the quiet out of the quiet and put it into the noise. Number 3, make yourself predictable. Trust grows when people can anticipate you. Here's the last one that might be the hardest. I want you to stay in it stay with your compassion, stay with your journey longer than the skepticism will. Consistency will always outlast doubt. So I want you to pause and think. Think about what I just told you. Which step did you rush through because it was uncomfortable? Think about it. The step that you rush through is the one that your team needs the most from you. Consistency without reassurance doesn't work. The skill in this session isn't explaining more. It's holding on and continuing to do it without being rewarded. Can you show up the same way even when no one thanks you yet? I coached a leader who said something that I hear all the time. I've changed. Why won't they move on? Why are they stuck? And they had been a team and things were improving, but they were still guarding and performance was flat. And so I asked the leader, I said, well, how long did it take you to lose their trust? He responded, about a year. I said, okay, so why do you think rebuilding trust is going to take less time than it did to break it? That's when that leader stopped performing his change and started practicing being consistent. As he began to do this, safety came back first, performance followed later, and then the trust came. However, I will warn you, as you begin this journey, your teams will test you. They're not doing it on purpose. They do it unconsciously because they're looking for a relapse. You have to remember, they are still remembering how it felt to be unheard, how it felt to be ignored, right? One moment of clarity for you doesn't erase 10 patterns for them. Your team, they're not punishing you. They're just checking to see if it's safe to believe again. So you can't reclaim trust. You have to hold it. Let me leave you with this. If compassion returned, but trust haven't, that doesn't mean that you failed. It means your leadership journey just entered the most honest phase. Because trust doesn't come back when leaders feel better. It comes back when teams feel safer. Remember, wanting trust isn't the same as being ready to hold it. Because holding trust requires restraint. That means no rushing the room. No looking around and chasing validations. Not changing again because this one's not working. And the most dangerous moments in leadership, it's not when trust is broken. It's when leaders believe it's back. So I leave you with this question. How do you know the difference between trust returning and a team that has simply learned to work around the new you? If you don't have an answer for that, that's okay. That's where we're going to go in the next episode. I'm Antrea Dowd, and this is Purpose, Presence, People. Leadership lives in the moments that matter most. How you listen, respond, and lead under pressure. Take one idea from today and put it into practice. Thank you for listening. And remember, lead with intention, and I'll see you next time.